Welcome to Early Intervention Reading and Writing Pre-K produced by Educational Services of Glen Ellen. What do all these people have in common? Any ideas? Dyslexia, and as you can see, the list goes on. Today we are going to talk about the importance of early intervention as it pertains to learning disabilities, like dyslexia. We will do this through using this model of assessment, response, and finally, intervention. Before we can assess, we must first understand what we are assessing for. It has taken us a long time to understand what it actually means to have a learning disability, or an LD. In the past, people often faced the term with confusion and fear, immediately clumping students with LDs in the category of slow or even lazy. Although the term is still complicated, there is a lot we know about it that disproves these previous assumptions. The term learning disability is a very broad term, so today we are going to focus in on a specific learning disability. A specific learning disability is when, unrelated to other broader issues, such as speech issues or visual or hearing impairments, the brain has problems processing a specific skill, such as reading, spelling, writing, or even math. Basically, it is when your performance is poor but your ability is high. In elementary school, one way we can assess this is through administering an IQ test and comparing a student's aptitude or ability to their achievement or performance. When we see this sort of discrepancy, often it indicates a possible learning disability. This is one shape of identification and assessment in a school setting, but we must look at it differently when working with young children who are only 4 or 5 years old. Developmental or red flag. Just like we did not expect our 6-month-old to get up and start walking, we cannot expect our 4-year-olds to read a chapter book. But for most of us, we started looking for signs of walking between 9 and 18 months. If our child was not walking at 18 months, that delay might suddenly turn into a possible symptom. It was no longer developmental. Although reading is always developing and fine-tuning from the start of life to the end, there are certain indicators that we look for to make sure there are no niches along the way. Some kids seem to take off mastering the alphabet early on to only slow down and struggle with the sound-symbol relationship. Other kids seem to be fluent readers by mid-kindergarten year, but might have little ability to understand what they have read. All these things are considered developmental as long as they grow through it by approximately the end of their 1st grade year. Just like people are not better runners for walking at 9 months over their friend who might have walked at 12 months, adults are usually not better readers because they were fluent in kindergarten versus 1st grade. However, that being said, there are reading indicators used to measure the progress made towards broader skills. For example, babies' heights and weights are tracked to measure their physical development. Indicators can be tracked to measure a student's reading development. It is important to know where your child stands because early intervention is key. In early childhood, who is the best person to measure these indicators? Parents. We are our children's first teachers and we are 100% vested in their growth and development. We simply need the tools to know how. So basically, I am suggesting routinely ask your children a variety of simple questions and then you decide if intervention is right for your young reader. Remember, recognizing a lag or delay in a student's reading growth doesn't mean there is necessarily a disability, but early detection and intervention will pay dividends in your student's reading success down the road. The tools provided in this presentation do not take the place of diagnostic testing provided by doctors, psychologists, or other diagnosticians. These tools are intended to provide families with general information regarding their students' progress towards reading goals. Today I'm going to show you 3 common assessments from the University of Oregon Center on Teaching and Learning called DIBELS. The record sheets are from the DIBELS program and not intended for use, but rather as an example of home-based assessment. The first at-home assessment you can use to mark your students' progress is beginning sounds. Provide this assessment 3 times throughout the pre-K year for 1 minute each. For our purposes, the goal is just to see steady progress. Before beginning, practice with your student. In this game, you are looking for initial sounds, not letter identification. Collect a pile of pictures that your child is familiar with. Say to your student, "This is a fish. Fish starts with the sound f. Can you say f?" After they begin to understand what you are looking for, begin timing and showing your student another picture and say, "This is a bike. What sound does bike start with?" Give your reader 3 seconds to produce the sound. If they get it correct, simply say, "Good job," and move on. If they get it incorrect, say, "The first sound in bike is b," and then move on to the next picture. Keep track of how many beginning sounds they identified in a 1-minute time and save the data to compare when you assess again later in the year. In this assessment, letter naming, parents are directed to ask their students to identify as many uppercase and lowercase letters as they can in 1 minute. Letters are arranged on the page in random order. Begin by pointing to the first letter on the page and saying to the student, "This is the letter D. Can you say D?" Move through the page from left to right. Each student can take up to 3 seconds to identify each letter. Again, provide this assessment 3 times throughout the pre-K year. During this timeline, you are just looking for steady growth. There is no magic number. In this assessment, which is used often for kindergartners, but you can make a variation to be given at the end of your child's pre-K year too, you are looking for phonemes or phoneme segmentation. Provide this assessment 3 times throughout the pre-K kindergarten year for 1 minute each. In this assessment, you are determining if a student can segment a word into sounds or phonemes. For example, the word cat has 3 phonemes, k, a, t. Another example is the word mine. It has 3 phonemes too, m, I, n. It has 4 letters, but only 3 phonemes because the E is silent on the end. When explaining this activity to a student, say, "I am going to say a word. After I say it, tell me all the sounds in the word." So, for example, if I say Bob, you would say b-a-b. Practice with your students several times before starting to time them. For every segment the student identifies correctly, they receive 1 point. Remember, you do this assessment for a total time of 1 minute. And for our purpose, the goal is to see steady progress after each assessment. How to respond depends on the severity of the situation. Here are a few good sites I recommend when wanting to learn more about learning disabilities. The first is a documentary on dyslexia featuring Bruce Jenner, former U.S. Olympian. The entire program is easily viewed online at this website. The second is a site founded by the Charles Schwab Foundation. This is an excellent site for information related to anything in the education arena. This particular link focuses on early signs and symptoms of LDs. The third is the Illinois branch of the International Dyslexia Association, which is actually located right here in Glen Ellen. They have a huge amount of information regarding dyslexia and local resources to help students. Also, compare and contrast what you know about your child. Have you observed other red flags, such as, can your child remember the names of classmates? Does your child have trouble using words in the correct spot when speaking? For example, they might say, "Hey Mom, are we having cheese and macaroni for dinner?" rather than macaroni and cheese? Does your student have trouble with rhyming or remembering the rhyme at the end of a song or nursery rhyme they have heard time and time before? Base your response on what your instincts tell you and what you know about your student, not just a few assessments. Based on what you know about your student, interventions can be simple things done at home. When choosing to do more reading-related interventions at home, take the time to learn what type of learner your child is. Is she a visual learner, or is he an auditory learner? Use his or her strengths to reinforce things at home. We recommend a book by Howard Gardner called Multiple Intelligences to help you identify your students' different learning strengths and styles. However, if your intuition is more strong and the evidence is mounting that your student is lagging behind, consider more structured interventions as an option. The public school system has a wonderful amount of services available free if your child qualifies. Sometimes, however, a specific learning disability alone might not be enough to qualify for services in the preschool years, but it's worth investigating. Lastly, consider tutoring with a multisensory program. Research shows that students with dyslexia and other specific learning disabilities learn to read, but must be taught differently. The English language must be broken down and taught one step at a time in a multisensory fashion. Programs such as Wilson or Linda Mood Bell are just a few that are structured, multisensory, and very effective. So what does all this mean? In early intervention, parents are responsible for assessment, response, and intervention actions. ESGE hopes this seminar has provided you with useful tools which can help you through this process. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.